Welcome to our poster presentation on youth critical consciousness. We conducted this narrative review to identify what the literature has to say about supporting youth through their critical consciousness journeys. And in total, 42 papers were summarized, and we have the findings below for you. The first finding, highlight 1, is unconventional methods. This narrative review, because it was so flexible, allows certain freedom to identify unconventional CC conceptualizations. Example of such a paper is Brennan and Jackson 2022, and the method that they used was called deep canvassing conversations. Essentially, their research team initiated conversations with participants who held racist beliefs, anti-Black in particular, and they assessed how racist individuals verbally resolve their own cognitive dissonance regarding racism. And I think this paper really highlighted the importance of Cc discourse not only with undecided communities, also with communities who have already taken a stance that may run opposite to Cc, as in it's important to engage with communities who are potentially already racist in certain ways, and continuing that conversation with unconventional methods would certainly lead to a greater level of CC in the population. Second highlight is voting. Multiple papers listed voting as a desired outcome after successful CC. Reflecting on Fair's writing, CC is conceptualized as taking action against inequities, including inequitable systems of voting. So given research-based inequities uncovered about the current voting system, whether voting itself is sufficient to alter inequitable systems may be worthwhile to consider in future research. In other words, it's important to not diminish youth and kind of sidelining them towards just casting a vote, but rather raising that critical consciousness to a level where they may feel comfortable voicing their concerns with inequitable systems in voting and dismantling inequitable systems. Likewise, we see this with social mobility, where papers encourage academic achievement or employment outcomes, but at the same time, there's a component that's missing where there's no discussion about economic inequalities and also potential inequitable systems that one has to be engaged in when they are employed. This narrative review really raised the question of whether we're pressing students towards conforming to social norms as a part of CC just so they could be rewarded with social mobility that's withheld from them, or we're actually encouraging students to challenge inequitable financial systems in the world.
Thank you, John. My highlights will focus on the mechanisms identified that could potentially enhance CC development. As John mentioned, there are various conceptualizations, but I will break it down into 3 components: critical awareness, motivation, and action. Highlight 4 is the enhancement of critical awareness. CC can often contain difficult, uncomfortable, and controversial topics, which are at risk of being overlooked by standard curriculum. By acknowledging this, youth can be encouraged to think critically about the biases of what is included and excluded, both in history books and what shows up in the news in present day. Hughes found that both Black and white American children increase the value of racial fairness after learning about historical racism. Highlight 5 is critical motivation. One interesting takeaway was how increasing awareness may actually negatively impact their motivation, increasing the risk of feelings of unfairness, depression, and hopelessness. And so, with additional awareness, efforts could be made to prepare disadvantaged youth for this bias and build their own capacity and confidence. This could be done by adult role models, modeling critical consciousness and critical thinking. The final highlight is critical action. The literature notes the importance of real, tangible projects where youth can meaningfully contribute. Historically, there's been a lack of funding and availability, and again, this can lead youth to feel further devalued by their community, especially when youth participation is seen merely as a token and their voices are not taken seriously by adults.